9 and 10. This is Mrs. Knight, and today we're going to be looking at sampling methods. So sampling methods follows on from the work we've been looking at on market research, and this is part of the coursework for RO65. So what are sampling methods? So when we're doing market research and we're conducting our own primary research and we're getting questionnaires to find out customers' views on what they want and their likes and their dislikes, we need to ask a certain number of people. It's not possible for us to ask everyone in the entire population, and so we take a sample. So that sample, we hope, is going to be representative of the entire population, and the sample we will use to base our judgments for our market research. So when we're talking about sampling methods, we are referring to the way that we select people to take part in our own primary research. So if you were to come up with a definition of sampling, I've got a definition for you here. And sampling is a method of selecting customers to gain their options or opinions on a product or service. And the types of sampling that we need to know for our coursework are random, cluster, quota, and convenience. So if you pause the video now, you can make a note of the definition of sampling and of those 4 types, which we are going to look at in a little bit more depth shortly. Okay, so we're going to look at cluster sampling first of all. So definition of cluster sampling is when parts of the population are sampled because of their geographic group or their cluster. So an example of this would be primary school children in Nottinghamshire, so that would be the cluster, and then we'd take a sample of children within that for our cluster sampling. For your coursework, you need to show knowledge and understanding of all these different methods. So what I would like you to do now is to make some notes on cluster sampling from my PowerPoint, and then when we get back in school, you will be able to transfer those notes, whether they're either written or whether they're typed, into your coursework, and that will go to support the grade for RO65. So if you'd like to pause the video now and make your own notes on cluster sampling. Okay, so now we've identified what cluster sampling is, I've got a task for you to do. I want you to think about what the advantages and disadvantages for a business are of cluster sampling. So if you want, you can use the notes that we've just had on the previous slide. You may decide to use the internet. Absolutely fine, but pause the video whilst you note those down, and then I'll go through the answers with you. Okay, hopefully you're able to find a few. So advantages of cluster sampling. It's a lot more cost effective or a lot cheaper than doing face-to-face interviews, because you are asking a cluster or a group of people instead of doing individual one-to-one interviews. And by having a cluster, you can gather opinions of specific or targeted groups of people. A disadvantage is that it can be expensive. So although it may be cheaper than face-to-face interviews, we can't really say that it is that cheap, because if you've got a large cluster, it can be really expensive. So the key is to have an optimal size of cluster. And also, in order for it to be of any kind of value, a business would need to have a clear idea about who to target. So as the example said about primary school children within a cluster, you need to decide first of all what you want the cluster to be. So do you want 14-year-old girls in a cluster to find out what they think about a new lipstick or a new foundation? Okay, businesses would need to be really, really specific with cluster sampling. Okay, pause the video now if you want to add any of these into your own notes. Okay, the next one is random sampling, and random sampling is the most common one that businesses use. So random sampling means well, it does what it says on the tin. It means that members of the population, so people who you ask, have an equal chance of being asked when doing the market research, because you just ask random people. So, and basically they select people at random to answer them. So it's very much like a lottery, so to speak. Pause the video now and note down the definition. Okay. As with the previous one, what I would like you to do now is to do the advantages and disadvantages of random sampling. This is an activity not obviously to just fill lesson time, but the information that you use from both the definitions and the advantages and disadvantages can, as I've mentioned before, be transferred directly into your coursework. So what you are doing now, ultimately, you are saving yourself some time when we are finally back in school and we're getting up to speed on coursework. You can just transfer this back directly into your coursework. Pause the video now and have a look at advantages and disadvantages. Okay, hopefully you've managed to come up with a couple of points for random sampling. So some of the key advantages here are it eliminates bias, because you're not biased to one particular group or another, because you've selected your respondents completely randomly, and you're able to get a wide spread of opinion from a wide variety of people. The drawbacks of this can be time consuming to set up, because if you're trying to make it unbiased and completely random, it's going to take you a while to get that sorted and get resources allocated properly. It can also be costly, and it requires far more effort than other types of sampling, such as convenience. Pause the video now and add some of these extra points into your notes. Okay. The third one is quota sampling. So quota sampling is where you aim to get a sample that is going to be completely representative of the population. So we then split the population, or a posh word is stratify, by different factors. And these could be things like income, age, and location. And from that, we get a sample from each section that are chosen to take part. Pause the video now and make some notes on quota sampling. Okay, as previously, I'd like you to identify the advantages and disadvantages of quota sampling. Have a go answering these yourself, or if you get stuck, have a go looking on Tutor2U, because they'll be able to give you some pointers to help you. Pause the video and complete the task. Okay, so advantages of quota sampling. It's a quick and easy way of getting a sample, and because you've stratified the results, or you divided them up, you are getting a true reflection of the wider population. So your results are likely to be more reliable and more valid. Drawbacks of quota sampling is it's not random. So there's a risk of bias. You may be biased against certain income groups or certain age groups as well, and that could be considered a limitation to your research. Another disadvantage is that you need to have a clear understanding of the population that you've chosen in order to ask. And you need to have a lot of information about them before they're divided. So you need, if you're going back to the 14-year-old girl example, you need to understand the 14-year-old girl market and what they are looking for in terms of lipsticks or makeups, etc., before you then split that down into, say, different income groups or different sort of demographic backgrounds. Pause the video now and add some of these extra points into your work. Okay, the final sampling method that we need for our coursework is convenience sampling. So this method of sampling is when you ask people who are willing to take part and available at any time. So you will just go and ask these people. So an example could be when we're in class and I ask you to make a questionnaire and you get the people sitting next to you to take part. So they're here, they're You're not having to travel too far. You're not having to go out of your way. There are people who are there and they're willing to participate. Pause the video now and note down the definition. Okay, the final one is the advantages and disadvantages of convenient sampling. Again, we can transfer this directly into your coursework and it's going to save you time when we get back into school. So pause the video now and have a go at the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, hopefully you're able to find these quite easily. Advantages of convenient sampling are it is cheap. It's easy to conduct because people are close and they are willing to participate. A drawback could be people may not be willing to take part, even though we said that they can for an advantage. It's an advantage if they are there and they are willing, but a drawback could be people are there but they don't want to do it at that particular time. Or there could be the people who you don't wish to target. They may be there and available, but it may not be who you wish to ask. Pause the video now and add some of these extra points into your coursework, into your notes, sorry. Okay, task. So this is the first part of a task where I'm getting you to have a look at things to do with sampling. And the first part before we start to look at sampling is to think about a new product or service that can be offered by each of the following. And we've got a snack bar. We've got a street vendor selling drinks. So this could be someone who is like in those like little caravans that pop up like on the cars or wherever, and they'll sell hot drinks, they'll sell cans of Pepsi, they'll sell fruit shoots, energy drinks, etc. So one of those. So obviously I've just given you some examples of what they could sell, but a new product could be something like they could start selling milkshake or they could start selling smoothies. A cleaning business and a gardening service. So for each one, think about a new product or service. Pause the video and then complete that task. The next thing, what you need to do, for each of the businesses that we've looked at on the previous slide and the ones that you've thought about a product or service for, they will need to find out some information from customers. And in order to do that, they will need to use some sampling techniques. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to draw the table that's below, and for each one, have it use a different sampling method. So if I go back to the one about the street vendor selling drinks, I'm going to say that my street vendor is going to start selling smoothies, and these are going to be ones that they make themselves. So that's the proposed new product. What sampling method am I going to use? Well, I think I'm going to use random sampling, because if I'm going to be based in a caravan or whatever they're called on the cars, the people I get are random. We may get some children coming home from school, you may get some dog walkers, you may get some little old ladies out for a walk with their friends, you may get mums with their pushchairs, taking children out. So I'm going to use random sampling. And then I'm going to say why this is appropriate. I'm going to say random sampling is appropriate because, and then give my reason. So I could say things like people who would visit this particular location or this particular drink place could be anyone from any kind of background, any demographic. And in order for me to find out if they buy this product, I'm best to ask random people, because I don't just get one type of person come to my drink place, I get lots of different people. So for each one of the ones on the previous slide, for each one of the ones you noted down, have a go at what type of sample method you would need for the new product or service, and then tell me why you think it is going to be of some benefit. Pause the video and then complete the task. Okay, so we've done all the background work now to sampling, and all this work can, when we get back, as I've mentioned previously, we can transfer it straight over into your coursework. What I'd like you to do for a little bit of an extension now is to think about the market research methods that you've already said that you're going to do. So if you're in year 10, you may already have decided that you've done a questionnaire and that you've done some internet research looking at competitor data. If you're in year 9, you may have just only decided, right, we're going to do a questionnaire, but I'm unsure about what else to do. And you may be thinking of doing a focus group, whatever. If you are doing a questionnaire, which I'm sure most of you are for one of your primary research choices, you will have to select a sampling method. And what I would like you to do is think about ones that you would do and why you would pick it. So when we've transferred all the sampling stuff over into your courseware, you will then say, I will use convenient sampling for my market research on hats because, and then you will tell me why you have chosen it. And although you've already mentioned the advantages and disadvantages, you will mention them again, but relate them back to your business. So that's a little bit of an extension task for you to start thinking of there. Okay, thank you very much for your time today. And I look forward to seeing your work on sampling. Bye now.